I speak 9 languages. The declaration, spoken by a 14-year-old black girl, hung in the air of the penthouse office, as fragile and as sharp as a sliver of glass. And the billionaire laughed. It was not a sound of joy, it was a weapon, a harsh metallic grinding that echoed off the obsidian marble walls, a sound forged in boardrooms and honed on the frailties of lesser men. It ricocheted across the 60th floor of the Ethel Corporation Tower, a steel and glass titan that pierced the Chicago sky, looking down on the river as it snaked through the city like a vein of liquid night. Julian Croft let the laugh die, a cruel smirk taking its place. He tilted his wrist, a deliberate, practiced motion, so the platinum gleam of his Patek Philippe caught the recessed lighting. It was an $80,000 punctuation mark to every sentence he spoke, a silent reminder that time, for him, was a commodity he owned, while for others, it was something to be sold cheaply. The walls around him were not decorated, but curated, hung with abstract paintings whose value could swallow whole suburban neighborhoods. The air itself smelled expensive, a sterile, refrigerated scent that promised nothing organic could ever truly thrive here. "Send them in." Julian's voice, a low baritone accustomed to absolute obedience, crackled through a gold-plated intercom. A disembodied voice, smooth as polished steel, replied, "Elena Vance and her daughter are here for the custodial contract review." The vast, smoked glass doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a woman in a crisp, dark blue uniform pushing a supply cart. This was Elena Vance. Beside her, a slender girl with intelligent, watchful eyes stood straight and still. This was Maya. She carried a worn school backpack, its zippers frayed but its canvas spotless, and her shoes, though old, were polished to a mirror shine. For a fleeting moment, Maya's gaze swept the room, not with the awe of a tourist, but with the cool appraisal of a strategist measuring a battlefield. This was the space her mother had orbited for 8 years, a ghost in the machine, polishing surfaces she was never meant to see her own reflection in. Julian circled them, a shark gliding through its own territory, scenting the subtle frequencies of fear and deference. "Elena," he began, the name a tool he used to establish dominance. "8 years you've been with us. Impressive loyalty. What's your educational background?" "I finished high school, sir." The "sir" was a shield, perfected over years of navigating hostile spaces. "Only high school." Julian let the words hang, a mocking verdict. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, slid to Maya. A sly, predatory grin twisted his lips. "And this must be the little project. Teaching her how to dream big, are we?" He gestured vaguely at the skyline, a tapestry of glittering ambition. "Just so you know, this isn't a place for people of your background to dream. The air is a bit thin up here." The words were delivered with the casual cruelty of a man who had never been contradicted. Elena bowed her head, a familiar, instinctive gesture of self-preservation. She had survived 8 years in this tower by making herself small, by understanding that every silent footstep she took on the plush carpet was a concession. The building's foundation was built on the muffled pride of workers like her. But today was different. Today, her daughter was beside her. Today, shame did not flow inward to be absorbed. It bristled outward, forming a crown of invisible thorns. Have you ever felt that? That moment when enduring for yourself is one thing, but enduring in front of your child is another entirely? It's a line in the sand drawn by love itself. What would you do if the world tried to tell your child their place? Would you shrink, or would you find a voice you never knew you had? Stick with us, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because this is a story about the day the rules were rewritten. Julian, reveling in his casual power, fanned out a sheaf of yellowed, brittle pages on his granite desk. "Let's have a little fun," he announced. "An ancient manuscript I just acquired at auction. The Weaver's Codex. 5 of the top linguistics PhDs in this city have already given up on it. A linguistic labyrinth, they called it." He ticked off the languages like a list of conquered territories. Classical Chinese, ancient Arabic, Sanskrit, archaic Hebrew, Old Persian, medieval Latin, each section in a different, dead tongue. He looked at Maya, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Hey, kid, take a guess what it says. Bet you can't." Maya looked down at the pages. The script did not look like writing. It flowed and coiled like a living thing, a river of forgotten thoughts splitting into 100 different streams. She did not hurry. Her silence was not empty. It was dense with focus. Julian's grin widened. He turned his attention back to Elena, the true target of his performance. "You see, Elena, this is the natural order. You scrub toilets for people who are smarter than you. Your daughter—" He paused for effect, twisting the knife. "She'll end up doing the same. Intelligence is hereditary. And with her skin," he added, the words a final, venomous dart. "Climbing these particular stairs is an even taller order." Maya lifted her gaze. Her eyes were not filled with the fire of anger, but with the steady, unnerving calm of deep water. "You said the translators couldn't read it," she stated, her voice even and clear. "Can you?" Julian was momentarily thrown. "I'm a businessman, not a linguist." "Then you can't read it either," Maya countered, her logic clean and sharp. "Yet you mock others for the same inability." She paused, letting the silence stretch, thin and taut like a wire. "Money isn't proof of intelligence, Mr. Croft." The hum of the building's climate control system suddenly seemed deafening. A dark flush crept up Julian's neck. He was a king in this castle, and a 14-year-old girl had just pointed out that his throne was, in one crucial respect, empty. "Do they teach you to talk back like that in public school?" he snapped, his voice losing its smooth veneer. "A poor black girl claiming she can read what Ivy League academics couldn't? Stop deluding yourself." Maya's gaze did not waver. "I speak 9 languages," she said again, not as a boast, but as a simple, verifiable fact, like stating the color of the sky. "If you want, I will try to read it." Julian raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A flicker of something. Was it intrigue? Passed through his cold eyes. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She knew her daughter was a voracious learner, a sponge for knowledge who spent her nights in the glow of the public library. But 9 languages? That was a world away. "List them," Julian commanded, crossing his arms, settling in for what he assumed would be a clumsy, embarrassing lie. Maya ticked them off on her slender fingers. "Spanish, my native tongue. English, fluent. Mandarin, conversational. Arabic, conversational. French, advanced. Portuguese, fluent. Italian, basic. German, conversational. And Russian, basic." Each language was pronounced with a flawless accent, her tone as crisp and certain as a nail driven into hard wood. Julian's laugh returned, but this time it was louder, more forced, a sound meant to paper over a sudden crack in his formidable certainty. "A public school girl from the South Side claiming 9 languages? Sounds like a headline from a clickbait farm. Prove it." Maya didn't flinch. "The Chicago Public Library offers free language programs. Dr. Al-Jamil teaches Arabic on Thursdays. He was a professor of classical literature in Damascus before the war. Now he drives a ride-share to support his family. Mrs. Chen teaches Mandarin on Tuesdays. She once ran an entire academic department in Beijing. Ms. Bianchi teaches Italian on Saturdays. She cleans houses by day and volunteers her time at night. They aren't wealthy, Mr. Croft, but they are rich in a way you might not understand. Their knowledge is a gift, and they share it freely. I learned from books, from free apps, and from people. Anyone can learn if they are given the opportunity and treated with dignity. Elena's white-knuckled grip on the cleaning cart slowly eased. A profound shift was occurring within her. For the first time, she saw her daughter's path not as a shadowed alley of struggle, but as a sunlit road paved with relentless persistence and the quiet strength of a hidden community. Julian glanced from Maya's steady eyes to the ancient manuscript. His mocking smirk faltered, as if someone had just tapped a hairline fracture in the bulletproof glass of his ego. "Go on then," he said, his voice quieter now, a flick of his chin indicating the pages. "Read." Maya drew a deep, centering breath. She stepped forward and laid her warm, living hands on the cold, brittle paper. And then she began. The air in the room changed. It thickened, became charged with the weight of centuries. Classical Chinese fell from her lips, the tones sharp and luminous like brushstrokes of light. Then, ancient Arabic, the words flowing in a melodic, mesmerizing current, curling like the intricate patterns of a Persian rug. Sanskrit followed, the syllables heavy and resonant, each one a seed of profound meaning. Archaic Hebrew, Old Persian, medieval Latin. Each language was a world unto itself, yet in her voice they flowed together, a single majestic river of thought coursing through many lands. The meaning wove itself seamlessly, telling a story that transcended any single tongue. Julian Croft's jaw, a feature that had intimidated rivals and board members for decades, fell slack. It snapped shut with the audible click of a fish pulled from icy water into the harshness of air. This office, this monument to his power, had witnessed hostile takeovers, corporate betrayals, and billion-dollar deals. But it had never witnessed power like this. Not the brute force of wealth, but the quiet, undeniable gravity of knowledge. Elena's hand rose to her chest, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. Her daughter. The child who did her homework under the flickering bulb of their small kitchen. The girl who carried the weight of their world in a tattered backpack was now speaking to emperors and philosophers from heights Elena had never even dared to imagine. Maya looked up, her voice returning to a steady, conversational English. "Shall I translate the core meaning for you?" Julian could no longer sneer. He couldn't argue. A single, raw yes slipped from his lips. It came not from his ego, but from a small, long-buried part of him that was capable of awe. "The Codex," Maya began, her voice filling the vast, silent space, speaks of the nature of wisdom. It says that true wealth is not counted in gold, but in the ability to see the dignity in every human soul. True strength is not found in humiliating others, but in lifting them up. And true power, she paused, her eyes locking onto his, is the quiet understanding that the one who believes they stand above all others is, in fact, the most impoverished of all. She stopped. The words were not an attack. They were a mirror. And in that mirror, for the first time in a very, very long time, Julian Croft saw himself. He saw a man who had built an empire of glass and steel, but whose own spirit was a hollow chamber. He wanted to retort, to bury her in jargon, in market analytics, in profit and loss statements. But those tools, his weapons of choice, suddenly seemed like children's toys, meaningless trinkets scurrying in circles. Before him stood a black girl from the South Side who spoke 9 languages, who could read 6 ancient scripts, and who did not flinch in the face of a titan. And he, Julian Croft, a man who bought what he didn't need just to feel the vibration of money, felt utterly, profoundly empty. I'm sorry, he muttered, the words alien on his tongue, falling like lead weights onto the marble floor. Elena looked up, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. In 8 years, no one on the 60th floor had ever said sorry to her. The word didn't seem to exist in this altitude. But Maya simply shook her head, a slight, firm gesture. Words are not enough, Mr. Croft. Actions are the only apology that has weight. She held his gaze. If you truly wish to demonstrate your sincerity, I will set the terms, but that comes after I finish the full translation. And so, on the 60th floor of the Ethel Tower, high above the sleeping city of Chicago, the world tilted on its axis. The rules of the game had been irrevocably altered. The person in control, at least in this room, was no longer the man behind the stone desk, but the 14-year-old girl standing beside an ancient manuscript, her hands steady, her voice unshaken. Maya translated each layer of the codex with the unhurried precision of a master artisan, unlocking a chest with 3 intricate locks. The first layer, she explained, her voice calm and pedagogical, is a direct instruction. It says, "He who believes his wealth makes him superior is the poorest of all, for he has lost the currency of connection. He who uses his position to belittle another is the weakest of all, for his stature depends on the diminishment of others." Julian pressed his hands flat on the cold edge of his granite desk. His knuckles were white. The solid, unyielding surface, which had always been his fortress, now felt like the edge of a precipice. An old, familiar voice screamed in his head. Argue, deflect, crush her with logic. But the logic in this room was no longer a commodity he could purchase. It was truth, resounding through the millennia in 6 different tongues. The second layer, Maya continued, is a metaphor. The text describes language as a great river. The water changes its name and its perceived color as it flows through different lands, from the mountains to the sea, but it remains, always, water. In the same way, people change their skin color, their station, their bank accounts, but they remain always human. Their inherent dignity does not change. She paused and looked directly at Julian as she spoke the word. Dignity. Elena drew in a sharp, ragged breath. She knew this truth not from a book, but from the marrow of her bones. She had lived it in every condescending glance, every impatient command, every time she was referred to as the help instead of by her name. But to hear her own daughter articulate this fundamental truth, to speak the word dignity as an unassailable fact in this very room, it was as if a locked door inside her chest had just been blown open, letting in a rush of cleansing, painful air. And the third layer, Maya placed her hand on the final fragile page, is a choice. It says, when a person of power is confronted with the wisdom they have been blind to, that is the moment of their true genesis. They can choose to awaken, or they can choose to condemn themselves to the gilded prison of their own making. Julian swallowed hard. The word condemn landed like a stone in a deep, silent well. He looked around his office. The priceless paintings, the crystal chandelier, the panoramic glass walls, they no longer looked like trophies. They looked like the bars of a beautiful, exquisitely crafted cage. He turned his gaze to Elena, and for the very first time, he did not see a uniform. He saw the face of a mother, etched with a quiet resilience that he could never buy, a strength he could never possess. I was wrong, he admitted again, the words coming easier this time, though still heavy with the rust of disuse. Maya cut in gently, but firmly. I have 3 conditions, Mr. Croft. If you fulfill them, your apology will become real. It will have substance." Julian nodded, a silent act of surrender. He was learning a new rule of power. It was not found in commanding, but in submitting to a moral clarity greater than himself. 1. Maya raised a single finger. "You will apologize to my mother, not just for your words today, but for the weight of 8 years of treating her as if she were invisible. You will say her full name, Elena Vance, and you will look her in the eyes when you say it." Julian turned, his entire body reorienting to face the woman he had overlooked 1,000 times. "Elena Vance," he said, the name a strange and formal arrangement of sounds. "I am sorry. I am sorry for not seeing you as a person. I am sorry for humiliating you in front of your child. I am sorry for never once, in 8 years, acknowledging your existence beyond your function." His voice cracked, just slightly, on the word person. Elena stood tall. She did not offer forgiveness, not yet. That was a gift to be earned, not a debt to be collected. But she acknowledged the moment, held it, and in doing so, claimed her own power within it. The man who had never bothered to learn her name was now being taught how to say it right. 2, Maya continued, her voice unwavering. "You will use your power to correct the imbalance you spoke of. You will establish a scholarship fund for students from working-class families in this city, with priority given to those from marginalized communities. You will provide long-term funding for the free language programs at the Chicago Public Library. And you will create real, tangible career pathways for the service workers in this very company, so that the hidden talent within these walls is given a chance to step into the light." Julian listened without protest. The instinct to ask, "What's the ROI?" was there, a ghost in his mind. But he silenced it. Instead, he asked a different question. "How many scholarships to start?" 150, Maya answered immediately. Not a small, symbolic number for a press release, a number large enough to represent a real commitment, a number that binds you to an ongoing action. 3. She raised her last finger. "You will learn a new language. You will understand what it feels like to be a beginner, to stumble, to be humbled by the simple act of communication. Every Tuesday evening, after work, you will attend Mrs. Chen's Mandarin class at the public library. No private tutors, no executive suite. You will sit at a wooden table with a pencil like everyone else." A faint, humorless laugh escaped Julian's lips. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated irony. The very idea he had mocked minutes ago was now his penance. "Agreed," he said, his voice quiet. "I will be there on Tuesday." Power has just been handed a mirror. But what happens when that reflection is ugly? Can a man who built his life on contempt truly learn humility? Or is this just the beginning of a new, more sophisticated performance? Let us know your prediction in the comments. Maya nodded, but she did not offer her hand. She simply held his gaze, searching for a glimmer of genuine intent beneath the wreckage of his pride. Julian did not look away. He had spent a lifetime avoiding uncomfortable truths. He would not avoid this one. "And the codex?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What does it say at the very end?" Maya turned to the final page and read aloud. "The richest person is the one who enriches others. The strongest is the one who helps the weak to stand. And the wisest is the one who knows they were once blind." At that, Elena's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face, not of shame or sorrow, but of a profound, shattering release. The invisible weight of 1,000 slights, a decade of being overlooked, seemed to lift from her shoulders, as if someone else had finally stepped forward to help carry the load. Julian turned his gaze back to the city beyond the glass. The river of cars still pulsed with light, the endless rhythm of commerce and ambition. But down there, somewhere among the stone and the steel, was a place he had never truly seen. A public library. A place where his destiny, he now realized, had just been rewritten by a 14-year-old girl. "We are done here," Maya said, gently closing the ancient manuscript. "I will see you on Tuesday at the library. Bring a notebook with grid lines and a pencil. Your homework," she added, a ghost of a smile touching her lips, "is to practice the 4 tones of Mandarin and copy the first 10 radicals." For the first time that afternoon, Julian Croft smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, a smile without any fangs. "Understood." He then turned back to Elena. "Thank you, Elena." Saying her name felt different now. It didn't make him poorer. In fact, it felt like the first step toward becoming truly rich. As mother and daughter pushed the supply cart out of the 60th floor office, the thick carpet no longer seemed to swallow the sound of its wheels. Perhaps it was because the gravity in the room had shifted. What now weighed the most was no longer the stone or the glass, but the promise a man had just made to himself. And Tuesday was coming. Pages full of mispronounced words awaited. Scholarship programs had to be built. The eyes of his peers at the country club would narrow with suspicion. But today, in the invisible ledger of Julian Croft's life, 3 items had been written in an ink that could never be erased. And at the end of the 3rd line was the signature of the youngest and most formidable teacher he had ever had, Maya Vance. The main branch of the Chicago Public Library smelled of old paper, polished wood, and the city's damp, resilient spirit. It was a cathedral of knowledge, its quiet reverence a stark contrast to the aggressive silence of Julian's office. He stood just inside the entrance, clutching a grid-lined notebook and a freshly sharpened pencil, feeling more out of place than he had ever felt in a foreign country. For the first time in 2 decades, he had arrived somewhere on time, alone, without an assistant clearing his path. His phone, his lifeline to a world he commanded, felt like a dead weight in his pocket. His eyes scanned the vast reading room. An elderly woman patiently guided her grandson through a math problem. A cluster of teenagers huddled over textbooks, their whispers a low, studious hum. A man who looked to be a recent immigrant typed slowly on a public computer, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if each letter was a careful step into a new world. "You came." He turned. Maya Vance stood there, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a navy blue hoodie draped over her shoulders. Her backpack looked heavy with books. She held no deference for his power, nor any smug satisfaction in his submission. She was simply a teacher, and he, her student. "Class rules," she said, her tone direct and businesslike. "No special treatment. Phones on silent. You don't interrupt other students. Your mistakes will be corrected, not ridiculed. Are we clear?" Julian nodded, slipping his phone into his bag. He felt a strange sense of relief, the lifting of a burden he hadn't known he was carrying, the burden of being Julian Croft. Maya opened her own notebook to a clean page. On it were 4 large, neatly drawn tone marks, a flat line, a rising arrow, a dipping curve, and a falling stroke. "Ma, ma, ma, ma," she pronounced, her voice as clear and precise as a tuning fork. "Mother, hemp, horse, scold. The meaning lives in the music. Repeat." Julian leaned forward, his expensive suit feeling stiff and absurd. "Ma," he said, the sound clumsy and flat, crashing onto the polished oak table. Maya offered a small, encouraging smile. It wasn't mocking. It was the patient smile of a teacher who understood the long road of learning. "Better than I expected for a first try. The 3rd time will be smoother. Now do it again." Sweat began to prickle on Julian's neck, despite the cool, circulating air. At the exclusive club where he dined, A single mispronounced French wine would be grounds for silent, condescending judgment. Here, in this public sanctuary, mistakes were not failures. They were rungs on a ladder. At an adjacent table, a man in his 50s with kind, tired eyes gave Julian a slight nod of encouragement when he finally got the third tone. Ma. Right. Maya introduced him. This is Dr. Al-Jamil, my Arabic teacher. He drives a rideshare from 4 a.m. to 3 p.m. Then he comes here to teach the beauty of the Fatiha. Julian rose instinctively to shake his hand. He was accustomed to shaking hands with men who moved markets. But he found himself fumbling, humbled before a man with no business card, no title on a door, only a wealth of knowledge he gave away for free. Good evening, Mr. Croft, Dr. Al-Jamil said, his English slow and graceful, carrying the melody of his native tongue. Here, we all learn to switch roles. Humility is the first language we must master. The words settled in Julian's chest like a sustained, resonant chord. Later, an older woman with silver hair and a warm, wrinkled smile paused by their table. Mrs. Chen, Maya said, this is my new student. He pronounced Ma correctly today. Mrs. Chen beamed. Ah, very good. Everyone stumbles on the first step. The secret is to stumble in the right direction. Julian found himself chuckling, a genuine, unforced sound. All his life he had climbed by conquest, by pushing others off the ladder. Today, he was being taught how to fall properly and how to get back up. At the end of the hour, Maya assigned his homework. 10 new radicals, 5 simple greetings, 20 repetitions of the 4 tones. I will see you next Tuesday. Same table, number 12. If you miss a class, you make it up. Not with money, with time. He nodded. As she packed her bag, he looked around the grand, modest room, his mind flashing to the 60th floor, where a single one of his chairs cost more than a year's worth of these library programs. The feeling of being allowed to be weak, to be a beginner, was terrifying. And it was strangely safe. The next morning, Julian called an emergency meeting of his executive team. On the massive screen in the boardroom, there were no revenue charts, no market projections. Instead, there were 4 lines in stark white text. 1. The Vance Scholarship Program. 2. The Public Library Language Initiative. 3. Service Staff Career Pathways. 4. Corporate Listening Circles. The room, usually buzzing with competitive energy, fell into a stunned silence. Marcus Thorne, the company's CFO, and a man who viewed the world through the ruthless lens of a balance sheet, was the first to speak. Julian, what is this? How much will it cost? What's the ROI? The shareholders will crucify us. Julian stood at the head of the table, but he did not project his usual aura of untouchable authority. He spoke calmly, methodically. 150 full scholarships for students from working-class families. Long-term, multi-million-dollar funding for 12 library branches across the city. A fully funded career track that allows any service employee to gain certifications in logistics, IT, or management on company time. The ROI, he said, meeting Marcus's gaze, will be measured in human potential, reduced turnover, and a corporate culture that doesn't rot from the bottom up. If you want numbers, we will measure them again in 1 year. The statement hung in the air, a declaration of a new era. The VP of Human Resources, a woman who had spent years implementing Julian's cutthroat policies, swallowed hard. Who will lead this initiative? Julian didn't hesitate. Elena Vance. A collective gasp went through the room. A janitor? Leading a corporate-wide initiative? It was unthinkable. The boardroom doors opened, and Elena walked in. She was not pushing a cart. She was carrying a notebook. On its cover, in her neat handwriting, were 4 words: naming, listening, fairness, opportunity. She stood before the assembled executives, her nervousness a visible tremor in her hands, but her voice was steady. She used no slides, no corporate jargon. Respect, she began, starts with saying someone's name correctly. The next step is listening not just to reply, but to understand. From there, we can begin to fix the systems, the schedules, the contracts, the benefits that treat people as disposable. And opportunity, she concluded, must come with guidance, not just a door left slightly ajar. A murmur rose from the back of the room. Isn't this just favoritism for minority staff? Julian heard it. In the past, he would have ignored it or crushed the speaker. Today, he addressed it. Anyone who has doubts is invited to attend the first listening circle this afternoon. No hierarchy, no titles. You will sit at the same table with Elena and Maya. You will hear their stories before you pass judgment on this policy. That afternoon, in a conference room stripped of its imposing table, chairs were arranged in a circle. Software engineers sat next to security guards. Marketing directors sat next to cafeteria workers. Maya, invited as a facilitator, opened with a simple, disarming question. Tell us about a time you have felt invisible at work. An Indian engineer, a brilliant coder who rarely spoke in meetings, hesitated before sharing how his team leader constantly joked about his accent. A cleaning woman from Poland spoke of being called the lady for 3 years, never once by her name, Anna. A young, ambitious team lead, the one who had made the joke about the engineer's accent, shrugged defensively. I didn't mean anything by it. I thought, Maya replied calmly, her voice devoid of accusation. The issue isn't intent, it's impact. From this day forward, in this company, we will use people's names, and if you make a mistake, you will correct it immediately. No excuses. That evening, an anonymous post appeared on the company's internal messaging system. So, when is the mandatory Mandarin class with the janitor's kid? LOL. It wasn't profane, but its venom was unmistakable. Julian replied publicly, from his own account, for all to see. We don't mandate language learning, we mandate respect. Anyone who refers to a 14-year-old child as the janitor's kid needs to relearn the language of basic human decency. The message ignited a firestorm of debate. Some employees flooded his inbox with messages of thanks. Others muttered about the CEO going soft. Julian didn't delete the arguments. He let them rage. Instead, he scheduled 2 more listening circles. Elena kept time. Maya asked the questions. Dr. Al-Jamil and Mrs. Chen attended as observers. By the 3rd session, a slow, grudging understanding began to dawn. This wasn't about favoritism. It was about correction. It was about rebalancing a scale that had been tipped for far too long. The pushback, however, was not just internal. A prominent financial blog ran a scathing headline. Ethel Corp goes woke. CEO takes Mandarin lessons from a child, elevates janitor to management. The comment section below was a cesspool of racism and classism, with anonymous trolls making vicious jabs about skin color and intelligence. Julian read every single one. Then he sent a company-wide email. It was short and to the point. When you challenge injustice, it screams. The screaming is proof that you're hitting the right nerve. Keep doing the work. Keep doing your homework. That Tuesday night, he returned to table number 12. Maya reviewed his homework, a page dense with clumsily drawn characters. She gave a small nod, a gesture of approval so subtle, yet so powerful, it made the billionaire want to work harder. For an hour, they wrestled with Mandarin characters. Each time Julian got one right, Mrs. Chen would offer a discreet wink from the next table. Each time he stumbled, Dr. Al-Jamil would murmur, "Slow down, breathe." At the end of the lesson, Maya gave him a new assignment. Next week, we will read a short passage from a classic poem. No pinyin, no transliteration. You will fall and get back up many times. That is the nature of learning. Julian smiled. A real smile this time. It turns out success has tones, too. I think I've been pronouncing it wrong for 51 years. Maya slung her heavy backpack over her shoulder and tapped his notebook lightly. Tomorrow at the company you will still face difficult sounds, but if you learn to read one sound correctly at a time, eventually it becomes a sentence, then a story. Night fell over Chicago. The light on the 60th floor of the Eiffel Tower still glowed, a beacon of corporate power. But now, for Julian, the warm, inviting lights of the public library felt brighter. He was beginning to understand that power is not lost when you learn to say, "I'm sorry." It is simply transformed, shifting away from the brittle echo of mocking laughter and toward the quiet, affirming nods of those who were never invited to the table in the first place. Friday noon at the Olympian Club, a sanctuary of old money and new power, all dark wood paneling, thick velvet drapes, and the hushed reverence of a cathedral dedicated to capital. Bradley Carter, a hedge fund shark. Sebastian Price, a pharmaceutical titan. Ethan Cole, a telecom mogul. They sat around their usual table, their eyes calibrated to measure a man's worth by his stock price and his capacity for ruthlessness. Bradley raised his glass of Bordeaux, the light catching its deep red color. "Julian," he began, his voice a silky purr that concealed a steel trap. "I hear you've had a cultural awakening, bringing social justice into the boardroom, taking Mandarin classes at the public library, and promoting a black janitor to a director-level position." Each word was carefully chosen, snapping open like the lid of a box to release a cloud of prejudice. Julian placed his own glass on the table, the crystal making no sound on the heavy linen. 6 weeks ago, he would have laughed along, perhaps adding a sharper joke of his own. Today, his voice was steady, level. "Her name is Elena Vance. She is leading our People and Culture Development Program, and she is designing career pathways that will become the new industry standard. And yes, I am learning Mandarin. My teacher is 14 years old. Her name is Maya Vance." Sebastian Price scoffed, a crude, dismissive sound. "Is this some kind of elaborate PR stunt, Julian? Or are you getting ready to sell out to Chinese investors?" Ethan Cole leaned in, his smile thin and predatory. "Don't kid yourself, Julian. You don't find talent in the basement of a building. You find it at Harvard, at Yale. You know the rules." Julian didn't flush with anger. He felt a strange, cold calm. Dr. Al-Jamil was a tenured professor of Arabic literature at one of the oldest universities in the world. Mrs. Chen chaired an entire department at a prestigious university in Beijing. They teach in a public library because of borders and wars and the brutal lottery of birth, not because they are lesser. "It has taken me 51 years, he said, looking each of them in the eye, "to see that." Bradley set his glass down with a sharp clink, a sound of impatience. "You're weakening our position, Julian. These woke stunts. They make shareholders nervous. They disrupt the order of things." Julian smiled, a smile without fangs, a smile they didn't recognize. "If my shareholders are made uneasy by the concepts of respect and investing in human beings, then perhaps Ethel Corporation is no longer the right fit for their portfolio." "Choose a side, Julian," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a low threat. "You have 1 week. Correct this aberration, or you are out of this circle." Julian stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. "I don't need a week. I'll leave right now." He looked at the 3 powerful men, at their expensive suits and their unearned certainty. "You can keep your circle. I'm building a new one." He walked away without looking back. Behind him, he heard someone mutter the word, "lunatic." It was a stone dropping onto a thick carpet, making no echo at all. Monday, the quarterly shareholders' meeting. The air was thick with tension. Marcus Thorne, the CFO, presented conservative forecasts, his voice carefully neutral. As expected, a shareholder from a powerful investment firm stood up. "Mr. Croft, we are hearing troubling reports about rising costs associated with non-revenue-generating social programs. Can you address the impact on our margins?" Julian didn't dodge. "Yes, costs have risen in the short term, but our employee turnover rate in service divisions has dropped by 20% in the last quarter alone. Our productivity has stabilized after a year of decline. Workplace accidents at our 2 satellite plants have fallen by 30% since we implemented the new training and schedule adjustments led by Mrs. Vance, and our applicant pool for all positions has doubled, driven by our growing reputation as a company that values its people. This is not about charity. This is about building a more resilient, more efficient, more sustainable company." Another shareholder, a notorious corporate raider, frowned. "That's correlation, Mr. Croft, not causation." Julian nodded. "I agree. So let's test it. I propose a 6-month trial. 2 of our divisions will replicate this model. 2 will remain under the old system. At the end of 6 months, we will compare the data. All of the data. Turnover, productivity, safety, and yes, margins. I'm betting on people. Are you brave enough to take that bet with me?" Mid-session, an aide leaned in and whispered urgently in Julian's ear. "There's a problem in the main lobby." He excused himself. When he reached the ground floor, he saw it. The large, hopeful poster announcing the Maya Vance Scholarship, featuring a photograph of Maya smiling, had been defaced. Someone had taken a thick black marker and drawn a crude caricature next to her face and scrawled the words, "Stay in your lane." No slurs, but the message was brutally clear, aimed at her skin color and her mother's former job. Security guards were flustered. Employees were gathered in shocked, whispering groups. Elena stood near the poster, her face pale but her chin held high. Maya arrived a few seconds later, on her way home from school. She stopped dead. She stared at the words, at the ugly distortion of her face. She didn't cry. Her expression hardened into one of cold, focused fury. She raised her phone, took a single, clear photograph, then turned to the assembled crowd. "We do 2 things," she announced, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent lobby. 1, we erase this filth. It does not get to live on a wall of opportunity. 2, we do not erase it in silence. We erase it together. Julian nodded, a surge of pride overriding his anger. He called the janitorial staff to bring cleaning supplies and had someone set up a portable speaker. "Everyone," he said, his voice steady and strong. "At this company we call people by their names, and we fix what is broken. This attack is against Elena Vance. It is against Maya Vance. And it is against every single person in this building who believes that education is a right, not a privilege. We will not retaliate in kind, but there will be consequences. We will review the security footage. There will be a suspension. There will be mandatory bias training. And there will be a public apology if the people who were harmed are willing to accept it." A tense silence fell. Then a mid-level manager, a man named Henderson, with a face slick with sweat, stepped forward. I did it," he blurted out, his voice choked with a mixture of fear and shame. "I was angry. The company is changing too fast. I felt left behind. I wasn't trying to be racist." Elena looked at him, not with rage, but with a weary clarity. "Lack of intent does not erase impact," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I hear your fear of losing your ground, but your ground does not become more solid by trying to bury me in the dirt." Julian suspended Henderson for 3 weeks without pay. His reinstatement was conditional on attending 3 listening sessions, delivering a public apology, and receiving a final sign-off from Elena and Maya, confirming that they believed his remorse to be sincere. The man nodded, his eyes wet with tears. "I am sorry," he said, looking directly at Elena for the first time as a person. Elena gave a small, formal nod. "I hear you." The graffiti was scrubbed away on the spot, but Julian gave an order not to reprint the poster. "Frame this one," he commanded. "As it is. Clean, but with the faint stain of the marker still visible." "Defaced and restored," Maya added quietly. "The stain remains to remind us." "And list the names of the people who scrubbed it clean," Julian continued. "The janitorial crew, the front desk staff, and Mr. Henderson." Heads nodded throughout the crowd. Community justice did not erase the wrongdoer. It placed them squarely within the process of repair. Julian returned to the shareholders' meeting upstairs. "My apologies for the interruption," he told the stunned room. "A lesson in our new corporate culture just played out in the lobby. It did not break our business model. It strengthened our trust model." One of the oldest shareholders, a silver-haired man who had been silent until now, spoke slowly, his voice raspy with age. "Mr. Croft, I despise hollow public relations, but if you are truly building a workplace where janitors and engineers resolve a crisis like that together, in public, without tearing each other apart, then I will keep my stake in your company for another 3 years, just to see how the story ends." That evening, Julian returned to the library. Maya opened a new lesson, a short passage from the Tao Te Ching. Julian stumbled, tried again, and finally read it correctly. "Good," Maya said with a smile. "Tomorrow the first round of scholarship interviews will be held. Do you want to sit in with the panel? Not to grade, just to listen." Julian nodded. "I have spoken too much in my life. It's time for me to learn how to hear other people's stories." That night, he walked through the silent 60th floor. The $1 million paintings were gone. In their place, he had begun to hang photographs. Dr. Al-Jamil standing before a chalkboard covered in elegant Arabic script. Mrs. Chen smiling, surrounded by a group of eager students. A young Latina girl from the Pilsen neighborhood, clutching her scholarship acceptance letter. Elena standing at the head of a round table, leading a meeting. Julian dimmed the lights. The atmosphere of the room had changed. It was no longer a cold fortress of power. It was becoming a gallery of human potential. Downstairs, in the lobby, the faint, indelible stain on the scholarship poster reminded him that this work would always leave marks, that progress was not a clean, straight line. And perhaps keeping a scar to remember was the most necessary thing of all. A constant, visible check against the arrogance that had once blinded him. Before locking up, he wrote a new entry in his grid-lined notebook. Learning a new language is hard. Learning the language of other people's lives is harder. But mastering both is how you truly begin to read the world. He closed the book. Tomorrow, the voices of the scholarship applicants would pour into his company like a fresh wind, and in the middle of it all, a pencil and a notebook still waited for him to mark the first, clumsy words of a rewritten life. The 6th floor conference hall had been transformed. Gone was the imposing mahogany table. In its place were simple folding tables arranged in a large U-shape, covered with plain white tablecloths. Paper cups of water and handwritten name tags replaced crystal glasses and engraved placards. Elena Vance moved around the room with a quiet, confident authority, coordinating the day. Beside her sat the blind review panel. 2 young, forward-thinking managers, a veteran engineer, Dr. Al-Jamil, Mrs. Chen, and Maya, the youngest person at the table, yet the one everyone looked to for guidance. Julian Croft sat at the very end of the U, an observer. In front of him was a sheet of paper on which Maya had written 4 words. Do, not, interrupt, listen. The first candidate was a girl named Amaya Rivera from Queens. She clutched a sheaf of poems, her fingers nervously twisting a cheap necklace. "I write them on the bus," she explained, "while I wait for my mom to finish her cleaning shift." Maya asked her a question that wasn't on the standard interview script. "When have you felt invisible?" Amaya's eyes filled with a memory. "Last year, a teacher told me my accent was cute, and then gave me a C- in English for using kitchen grammar." Dr. Al-Jamil asked her to read one of her poems. It was a short, fiery piece about the George Washington Bridge, written in a seamless blend of English and Spanish. When she finished, the entire panel was silent. Julian sat perfectly still, a single, powerful realization dawning on him. Talent didn't arrive in a limousine. It rode the bus. The second candidate was Jamal Carter from Brownsville, a lanky teenager with eyes that glowed with intelligence. He carried a small, complex robot he had built from scrap metal and parts he'd scavenged from discarded electronics. "I want to study rail engineering," he said. "The subway is like the city's circulatory system. I want to build a better heart for it." When Maya asked him about failure, Jamal grinned. "I applied for an unpaid internship at a big engineering firm. The guy who interviewed me looked at my hoodie and asked if that was my interview attire. Boursoy. I went home, coded a Python simulation of their entire signal switching system, and emailed it to him. They invited me back for a second interview." The third candidate was a quiet young white man named Noah Higgins from Staten Island. His father had died in the opioid crisis. "I work the early shift at the ferry terminal," he said, his notes neatly written. "I'm not great at speeches, but I am always on time." Maya made a note. Discipline. Perseverance. The scholarship was not about finding only one kind of story. It was about finding potential where the world had been trained not to look. Midday, a polished blonde girl named Chloe Thorne entered, her mother at her side. Her resume was a constellation of privilege: private school, model UN, summer camps in Europe, a recommendation from a senator. Outside the door, her father, CFO Marcus Thorne, sent a discreet text to an aide. "Make sure this one is flagged for the CEO." Elena saw the aide approach, but she intercepted him, her procedure unwavering. Maya handed out the blind review packets. Names, high schools, and zip codes had been redacted. Only the essays, the project descriptions, and the evidence of effort remained. Chloe spoke fluently and confidently, but when Maya asked her the same question, "When have you felt invisible?" she faltered. I've never really thought about that." Her grades were perfect, her experiences curated, but her story was thin. Her score from the panel fell short. During the lunch break, Marcus Thorne cornered Elena, his voice a low hiss. "You're rejecting real talent because of some misguided bias against the privileged." Elena's tone remained flat, professional. "We are conducting a blind review, Marcus. If your daughter's file is strong enough, it will stand on its own." Marcus bristled, but the memory of the listening circles held him in check. As he turned to leave, Maya, who had been standing nearby, quietly slid a folded piece of paper onto the table. It read, "Everyone wants a side door. Fairness is a straight line." Marcus read it, his face unreadable, and walked away. Over 2 days, 327 applications were reviewed. 220 interviews were conducted. The process distilled this raw data into 150 awards. The final list was a mosaic of the city. Black, Latinx, Asian, working class white, the children of mechanics, nurses, taxi drivers, and farmhands. Maya proposed one final, binding condition. Each scholarship would come with a requirement of 10 hours per month of give-back time, mentoring younger students, or volunteering at the library. Multiplication by design. The award ceremony was held in the company's auditorium. There was no giant LED screen, no thundering music, just a simple wooden stage, a black curtain, and a row of microphones. At the entrance, a new security guard, seeing a father in paint-splattered work clothes, automatically said, "Service entrance is around the back, sir." Elena appeared at his side in an instant. "There are no side doors here," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Please, come in through the main hall." The man, who had been about to turn away in shame, froze. Then a slow, grateful smile spread across his face. The press was in attendance. A reporter from a local news station asked Julian, "Is this just affirmative action 2.0?" Julian opened his mouth to reply, but then he looked at Maya. She stepped forward to the microphone. "Equality is giving everyone a pair of shoes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Equity is taking the time to make sure the shoes actually fit. This scholarship measures the foot first. We review applications blind. We look for effort, discipline, and curiosity. Then we provide the support that matches the need. No one is chosen because of their skin color. Everyone is chosen because of the potential that poverty and prejudice usually bury." A murmur of approval went through the room. The names were called. Amaya Rivera walked across the stage, her mother sobbing openly in the front row. Jamal Carter held up his little robot, and the hall erupted in applause. Noah Higgins just whispered, "Thank you," and clutched his acceptance letter like the ferry dock he worked on every morning. At the back of the auditorium, Marcus Thorne watched quietly. He remembered that his own father had mopped hospital floors for 20 years before becoming a shift supervisor. He had become so afraid of losing his position on the ladder that he had forgotten the struggle of the first few rungs. He bowed his head, a wave of shame washing over him. Afterward, a TV station requested a live interview. The reporter asked Maya, "You're only 14. Why are you teaching a CEO?" Maya looked directly into the camera. "Because he was willing to learn," she said, "and because anyone who truly knows how to say, 'I'm sorry,' deserves a chance to learn a new language." Julian laughed softly to himself. It was the best public relations line he had ever heard. Except it wasn't a line at all. It was the truth. That night, the elevator carried Julian and Elena down to the lobby. The once-defaced scholarship poster now hung in a beautiful frame, with a small brass plaque beneath it that read, "Defaced, repaired, stain kept to remember." Julian paused before the poster. "Tomorrow, I meet with the board again," he said. "They're going to want harder metrics, more data." Elena nodded. "Then we will bring them measurable stories. The reduced turnover in our service teams, the number of mentoring hours logged, the percentage of our night shift workers now attending classes at the library. These are the metrics of trust, and they are built one repeated action at a time." Julian stepped out into the cool Chicago night. He realized that among all the noise of the city, the truest sound he had heard all day was the silence in the auditorium. The silence after each scholarship name was called. The story that had begun with a cruel laugh on the 60th floor had changed shape. It had become a social contract signed by the trembling hand of a once arrogant man and the steady, clear script of a girl who knew how to read the world. And what about you? If you were in Lucia's place, would you have the courage to stand up for your mother against prejudice and power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. If this story touched your heart and carried meaning, don't forget to hit like, share it with friends, and subscribe so you won't miss the final chapter of this incredible journey.